A 6-year-old girl transforms the life of a lonely millionaire with her innocent kindness. What seemed like simple friendship reveals a hidden past and an unexpected blood tie. Now, a contested inheritance and a revealing letter will decide the fate of an entire family. Central Park in New York City was taking on orange hues with the morning sun. Seated on a weathered wooden bench, Henry Vancroft adjusted the clear tube that ran from his nose to the oxygen tank beside him. At 68, the real estate tycoon no longer had the physical presence of his prime. His face, marked by deep wrinkles and a pale complexion, contrasted with the impeccably tailored suit he insisted on wearing every day, even after being diagnosed with advanced stage pulmonary fibrosis. A few yards away, on the path that skirted the park, Joseph Evans hurried his granddaughter, Julia. The 62-year-old man, with graying hair and hands calloused from a life of hard work, constantly glanced at the cheap watch on his wrist. "Come on, Jules, or you'll be late for school, and I'll be late for my job at the supermarket." The 6-year-old girl, her braids adorned with colorful ribbons and her school uniform already slightly faded from use, held her grandfather's hand as she skipped along. "Grandpa, look at that man over there. Why does he have that thing in his nose?" Joseph looked in the direction his granddaughter was pointing and saw Henry on the bench. He gently pulled the girl's hand. "Don't point, Julia, it's rude. That must be a machine to help him breathe. Now let's go, we can't be late." But childish curiosity got the better of her. With a swift movement, Julia let go of her grandfather's hand and ran toward the bench where Henry was sitting. "Mister, why do you have that thing in your nose? Are you sick?" "Julia!" Joseph ran after his granddaughter, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. Kids." Henry, who for weeks had received no approaches beyond those of his doctor and lawyer, was surprised by those curious, lively eyes. For the first time in months he managed a smile. "It's no problem," he answered in a weak but polite voice. "Yes, little one, I am sick. My lungs don't work so well, so I need this to help me breathe." Julia looked at the device with fascination. "Does it hurt?" "Julia, that's enough questions. Let's leave the gentleman in peace," Joseph insisted, gently pulling the girl away. "She's not bothering me," Henry assured him. "In fact, it's nice to talk to someone different. And no, little one, it doesn't hurt, it's just inconvenient." A glimmer of understanding lit up the girl's face. She opened her colorful backpack and took out a cookie wrapped in a napkin. "When I get sick, Grandpa gives me a cookie. Here, this is for you to get better." Henry looked at the homemade cookie, visibly made with few resources, and something stirred within him. He who owned a mansion on the Upper East Side, who dined at the most expensive restaurants in the country, was now receiving a simple cookie from a child who clearly didn't have much. "Thank you," he said, accepting the gift with trembling hands. "That's very kind of you." Joseph watched the scene with a mixture of embarrassment and tenderness. "I'm sorry, sir. She's very giving, but we have to go. Let's go, Julia." "Can I come see the man tomorrow, Grandpa, to see if he's better?" Before Joseph could answer, Henry intervened. "If your grandfather allows it, I would be happy to see you again. I'm here every morning." Joseph hesitated. The man seemed respectable, and they were in a public place. Besides, they passed by here every day on the way to school. "We'll see, Julia. Now we need to go. Have a good day, Mr. Vancroft." "Henry Vancroft," the businessman introduced himself. "Joseph Evans. And this is my granddaughter, Julia." Henry nodded, watching the grandfather and granddaughter walk away. When they were some distance off, he tried the cookie. It was a bit hard, certainly made days ago, but to him, it had the taste of a humanity he hadn't experienced in a long time. The next day, to the businessman's surprise, the pair reappeared. Julia brought a colorful drawing she had made at school, a stick figure of a man with what looked like an oxygen tank beside him. "I made this for you, mister." "It's you in the park." Henry accepted the gift with genuine emotion. How long had it been since he received something so simple and sincere? The gifts he usually received were always calculated, from people who wanted something in return. "It's beautiful, Julia. I'll treasure it." This became a routine. Every morning before school, Julia and Joseph would stop for a brief chat with Henry. The girl would share stories from school, show him new drawings, or simply ask how he was feeling. Henry, in turn, told stories of his travels around the world, always taking care to adapt the narratives for a child's understanding. Meanwhile, discreetly, Henry began to observe Joseph. He noticed the simple clothes, always clean but worn. He saw the weariness in the man's eyes, who often mentioned needing to rush to his supermarket job in the morning before heading to his second job as a security guard in the afternoon, and still doing delivery gigs at night. One day, while Julia was distracted by a butterfly, Henry asked Joseph, "Are you raising your granddaughter alone?" Joseph sighed. "Yes, my daughter Amanda passed away 3 years ago. Complications from poorly treated pneumonia. Julia's father was never in the picture, so it's just the two of us." Henry felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his illness. "That must be difficult. It's what you have to do, isn't it? She's all I have left." Joseph looked adoringly at his granddaughter. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. I work 3 jobs, but still the medical bills that were left behind, well, we're getting by." That afternoon, after their meeting, Henry summoned his lawyer, Dr. Paul Mason, to his apartment. "I want you to discreetly investigate a family, Joseph Evans and his granddaughter, Julia. They pass through Central Park every morning around 7 a.m. The man works at a nearby supermarket, then as a security guard, and makes deliveries at night. The girl attends a public school in the area." Paul, accustomed to the eccentric requests of his wealthiest client, simply nodded. "Any particular reason?" Henry looked out the window, observing the Manhattan skyline in the distance. "Let's just say I found something interesting about this family. I want to know more about them, their financial situation, where they live, everything, and Paul, absolute discretion." In the days that followed, the friendship between Henry and Julia blossomed. The girl began to sit next to him on the bench, enthusiastically telling him about her teacher, Miss Marcia, and about her classmate Lucas, who pulled her braids. What no one noticed was how these brief daily encounters were affecting Henry. The businessman, who had given up on any experimental treatments after his terminal diagnosis, began to wonder if he should try one more time, not for himself, but to be able to see that smile for a few more days. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. A week later, Dr. Paul Mason entered Henry's luxurious apartment, carrying a folder of documents. The 55-year-old lawyer, always impeccable in his tailored suits, found his client sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset over the East River. "I have all the information on the Evans family as requested," Paul said, placing the folder on the glass table. Henry gestured to the chair in front of him. "And what did you find?" "The situation is more complicated than we imagined. They live in a small one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens. Mr. Joseph works 3 different jobs to support his granddaughter and is still drowning in his daughter's medical debt." Paul flipped through some documents. Amanda Evans, Julia's mother, suffered from a severe pneumonia that progressed to a systemic infection. Since they didn't have adequate health insurance, Joseph had to take out loans to pay for private treatment. Even so, it wasn't enough. Henry closed his eyes for a moment. And the girl's father. Not listed on the birth certificate. According to neighbors, Amanda never revealed who the father was. She did get married later, but the relationship lasted only a few months. Henry opened the side table drawer and took out the drawing Julia had given him. He looked at the childish lines with a new perspective. "What school does Julia attend?" PS 122, the Lucia Santos School. "It's a decent institution by public school standards, but obviously lacks resources," Paul replied, curiously observing the change in his client's expression. "If I may ask, why this sudden interest in this family?" Henry didn't answer immediately. He stood up with difficulty, dragging his oxygen tank to a bookshelf where he kept old photographs. He picked one in particular and handed it to Paul. Do you recognize this woman?" The lawyer examined the time-yellowed photograph. It showed a younger Henry, perhaps 20 years ago, next to a beautiful woman with dark hair. "No, who is she?" "Amanda Evans. Or at least, she was Amanda Costa back then." Paul's eyes widened in shock. "The girl's mother. You knew each other?" Henry sat back down, the effort of the short walk leaving him breathless. "We met a long time ago. Amanda worked as an executive assistant at my company when she was finishing her business degree. She was brilliant, dedicated. His voice trailed off for a moment. We fell in love. It was an intense but complicated relationship. I didn't know you had a relationship like that, Paul commented, surprised by the revelation. Few people did. At the time, I was divorcing my second wife, a messy process due to the division of assets. Amanda was much younger and the company's shareholders wouldn't have approved. We kept everything secret. Henry picked up a picture frame from his desk where there was a photo of a smiling Amanda. She got pregnant. We were happy at first, but then fear set in. The divorce proceedings got even more complicated, and my ex-wife's lawyers threatened to use my relationship with Amanda to question my moral character and affect the asset division. Paul began to understand the situation. And then? I asked Amanda for time. I said we needed to wait for the divorce to be finalized. She interpreted it as rejection. Henry shook his head, full of regret. We had a terrible fight. She quit her job and disappeared. I tried to find her for months, but she had changed her phone number, her address. When I finally got a lead, I learned she was married to another man. I assumed she had moved on, that maybe she wasn't even pregnant anymore. The lawyer connected the dots in his mind. And the dates match up with Julia's age. Henry nodded slowly. Julia is 6 years old. You do the math. So you think she might be my daughter? It's possible. More than possible. Henry took a deep breath, adjusting the oxygen flow. Paul, I don't have much time. You know that better than anyone. The doctors gave me 3 months at most. The lawyer nodded solemnly. He had been handling Henry's legal affairs since the diagnosis, organizing his will, and all pending matters. What do you intend to do with this information? I want to secure that girl's future. Regardless of whether she's my biological daughter or not, she and her grandfather have shown me more humanity in 2 weeks than many have in my entire life. Henry picked up a notepad and began writing instructions. I'm going to create a trust fund for Julia. I want it to be substantial, enough to guarantee a first-rate education, a comfortable life, and still have plenty left over for when she's an adult. Paul watched with concern. And what if Mr. Joseph thinks it's some kind of charity, or worse, that you have ulterior motives? That's why we need to talk to him in person. I want to explain my connection to Amanda. Henry coughed violently, staining his handkerchief with blood. He quickly hid it, but it didn't escape Paul's watchful eye. Your condition is worsening. You shouldn't be under emotional strain right now. And when would be the right time, Paul? When I'm no longer here? Henry smiled ironically. It's precisely because my condition is worsening that I need to resolve this now. In the following days, Henry continued to receive the morning visits from Julia and Joseph. The girl, noticing her friend's increasing pallor, brought him a small bracelet of colorful beads she had made in art class. It's a lucky charm, Uncle Henry. Miss Marcia said that when we give a gift made with our own hands, we pass on our good energy. Henry put the bracelet on his wrist with a genuine emotion he hadn't felt in years. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Julia. I'll wear it every day. That afternoon, after their meeting, Henry asked Paul to prepare all the documents for the trust fund. While waiting at the doctor's office for another checkup, the businessman wrote several letters, placing each one in a separate envelope with specific dates for delivery. The doctor, Dr. Robert Campbell, a longtime friend, examined the latest test results with a grave expression. Henry, I won't lie to you, the results are not good. The fibrosis is progressing faster than we expected. How much time, Robert? Be straight with me. The doctor sighed, taking off his glasses. Weeks, not months, and they will be difficult weeks. Your oxygenation is becoming more and more compromised. Soon you'll need full-time palliative care. Henry nodded, surprisingly calm. Thank you for your honesty. I need you to help me with something important. I want to be well enough for a crucial conversation in the next few days. Back at his apartment, Henry found Paul organizing the documents. The fund is almost ready. $30 million will be invested, which, with projected returns, should multiply significantly by the time Julia comes of age. Excellent. I also want you to find a comfortable house in Brooklyn Heights or Park Slope. in Joseph's name, and I want all of his debts to be paid off. Immediately. Paul took notes. I'll need authorization to access some offshore accounts. You have carte blanche. Use whatever is necessary. Henry looked out the window, thoughtful. Paul, I need you to arrange a meeting with Joseph, without Julia. I need to talk to him alone first. When? As soon as possible. Time is running out. The next morning, when Julia and Joseph appeared in the park, Henry looked especially frail. The girl, sensitive to the change, sat quietly beside him, just holding his hand. Uncle Henry, are you more sick today? Henry smiled with difficulty. A little bit, sweetie, but your visit always makes me feel better. As they were leaving, Henry gently held Joseph's arm. Could we perhaps talk alone one of these days? I have an important matter to discuss with you. Joseph frowned, surprised by the request. Is something wrong? Nothing to worry about. Just a personal matter I'd like to share. Of course, tomorrow I can come a little earlier, before I take Julia to school. I'll leave her with the neighbor, and we can meet here. Henry nodded, grateful. Thank you, Joseph. It means a lot to me. As he watched the grandfather and granddaughter walk away, Henry felt a mixture of peace and urgency. Time was running out, but for the first time in a long while, he had a clear purpose. He needed to connect the dots before it was too late. He needed to pave the way for Julia's future, even if he wouldn't be there to see it. The next morning, Joseph arrived at Central Park half an hour earlier than usual. The sky still held shades of indigo when he spotted Henry already sitting on the same bench, his oxygen tank faithfully by his side. Good morning, Joseph greeted, sitting down next to the businessman. Thank you for coming, Henry replied, his voice weaker than usual. I know your time is precious. Joseph observed the man carefully. In just a few weeks of knowing him, he could see the visible deterioration in his condition. The dark circles under his eyes were more pronounced, his skin paler, his breathing more labored. Are you all right? You seem worse today. Henry gave a faint smile. The doctors don't have good news, but I didn't ask you here to talk about my health. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's about your daughter, Amanda. Joseph visibly tensed. How do you know my daughter's name? I never mentioned. We knew each other, Joseph. Amanda and I. Henry took the old photograph from his pocket and handed it to the confused man before him. Joseph took the picture with trembling hands. There was his daughter, much younger, smiling next to Henry. I don't understand. When was this? How? About 7 years ago. Amanda worked as an executive assistant at my company, Vancroft Enterprises. She was finishing her business degree. Joseph studied the photo, his eyes welling up. She never told me she worked for you. She said she was a secretary at a big company, but never went into detail. There were reasons for the discretion. Henry took a deep breath, adjusting the oxygen flow. We fell in love, Joseph. Joseph's expression shifted from surprise to understanding, and then to something difficult to decipher. Amanda and I had a relationship that lasted almost a year. It was intense, real, but complicated by external circumstances. I was in the middle of a contentious divorce, and the difference in our ages and positions at the company made everything more delicate. Joseph remained silent, absorbing the revelations. When Amanda told me she was pregnant, I was happy, but also scared of the complications it would bring to the divorce proceedings. I asked her for time, but I was clumsy in how I communicated it. Pregnant? Joseph repeated, as if the word brought a new understanding. Yes, we had a terrible fight. She quit her job and completely disappeared. When I finally managed to find her months later, I learned she was married. I assumed she had moved on, maybe even terminated the pregnancy. I never imagined that Julia could be your daughter, Joseph completed, connecting the dots. It's a possibility I can't ignore. The age matches, and now seeing Julia, I see features. Joseph stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps in the park before returning. His expression was a mixture of confusion and indignation. Why are you telling me this now, after all these years? Because my time is running out, Joseph, Henry answered with surprising calm. And because finding you and Julia was like a final gift from fate, a chance to right my wrongs, to do something meaningful with my last days. Amanda married Peter Smith right after she left your job, Joseph revealed, sitting down again. It was a whirlwind marriage that lasted only a few months. He left her when he found out she was pregnant. I always thought he was Julia's father. Did Amanda ever say anything about me? Joseph shook his head. Never. She just said the past didn't matter anymore, that she would do everything on her own. Typical of her, always so independent, so proud. Henry smiled nostalgically. It was one of the things I admired most about her. The two men fell silent for a few moments, each lost in their own memories of Amanda. So, what do you intend to do with this information? Joseph finally asked. I want to do what I should have done 7 years ago. I want to take care of Julia, to secure her future. We don't need charity, Joseph replied proudly. It's not charity, Joseph. It's responsibility. If Julia is my daughter, and I believe she is entitled to a part of what I've built. And even if she weren't, which is unlikely given the timeline, she and you have brought me more joy in these few weeks than I've had in years. Henry took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Joseph. My lawyer, Dr. Paul Mason, is preparing everything. I've created a trust fund for Julia. It's $30 million that will be managed until she comes of age. In addition, all your medical debts will be paid off, and I'm buying a comfortable house in your name in Brooklyn Heights. Joseph looked at the envelope without touching it. This is too much. We can't accept. You can and you must for Julia's sake. I have no other heirs, Joseph. No recognized children. My estate would go to distant cousins I barely know or to partners who only care about money. Henry coughed violently, bringing a handkerchief to his mouth. Joseph noticed the bloodstains the businessman tried to hide. You really are very sick, aren't you? Terminal pulmonary fibrosis. The doctors have given me a few weeks at most. Hence the urgency. Joseph ran a hand through his grey hair, trying to process everything. What about a DNA test? Wouldn't it be more prudent to confirm before making such drastic decisions? I've already arranged for it, Henry replied. Dr. Mason has the kits ready. We can do it today if you'll allow it. But regardless of the result, my decision is made. The trust fund will be Julia's. Henry looked at his watch. Actually, I'd like to see your home, get to know your routine better. Would that be possible? Joseph hesitated. His small apartment in Astoria was far too humble to receive someone like Henry Vancroft. We don't have much space and the conditions are simple. I don't care about that. I just want to know Julia's world better while I still can. The sincerity in Henry's eyes broke down Joseph's last resistance. All right, you can visit us tonight if you like. Julia will be thrilled. She talks about you constantly. That afternoon in his luxurious apartment, Henry prepared for the visit. He chose discreet clothes, trying not to flaunt his wealth. He set aside some gifts for Julia, children's books, quality art supplies, and a special teddy bear he had bought specifically for the occasion. Dr. Mason arrived promptly at 6 p.m., bringing the necessary documents and the DNA test kits. Are you sure about this, Henry? It's a considerable sum, almost half your net worth. Absolutely. What's left of my life and money needs to have some meaning, Paul. And I've found that meaning in Julia. Paul studied his longtime friend. You really believe she's your daughter? I have no doubt. The timing lines up, and there's something about her, in her eyes, her smile. It's like seeing Amanda again, mixed with features from my family. At 7 p.m., Henry's driver parked discreetly on the narrow street in Astoria. The businessman, wearing a simple suit and carrying a bag of gifts, struggled up the 3 flights of stairs of the walk-up building, assisted by Paul and the driver who carried his oxygen tank. Joseph opened the door before they even knocked. The apartment, though small, was impeccably tidy. Julia, upon seeing Henry, ran to hug him, surprising the businessman with the spontaneous gesture. Uncle Henry, you came to my house. Come see my room. Julia's room was actually a makeshift space in the living room, separated by a colorful curtain. There were drawings taped to the wall, a few toys organized in a box, and a small bed with a unicorn blanket. This is where I sleep and play. Grandpa sleeps in there, the girl explained, pointing to the apartment's only real bedroom. I wish I had my own room with a big window, but Grandpa said one day we'll have a bigger house. Henry felt a lump in his throat. It's a very beautiful space, Julia. You've decorated it very well." As the girl proudly showed off each of her treasures, seashells found at the beach, colourful pebbles, award-winning school drawings, Henry observed the surroundings. The walls had cracks, poorly disguised by pictures. The old refrigerator made a constant hum, and the sofa showed signs of many repairs. But there was cleanliness, organization, and above all love in that small space. During the simple dinner, rice, beans, some chicken and salad, Henry felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The conversation flowed naturally, with Julia dominating most of it with her school stories and endless questions. "Uncle Henry, why don't you have any kids? Don't you like children?" The innocent question fell like a bomb at the table. Joseph shot an apologetic look, but Henry just smiled. "I like children very much, Julia. Sometimes life takes turns we don't plan. But who knows? Maybe I have a daughter, and I just don't know it yet." After dinner, while Julia was distracted with her new gifts, Joseph, Henry, and Paul discreetly collected the samples for the DNA test. A strand of Julia's hair taken from her brush completed the necessary samples. "How long until we get the results?" Joseph asked. "With top priority, 3 days," Paul replied. Henry watched Julia playing with the teddy bear. "It doesn't matter what the test says, Joseph. That girl deserves the world, and I want to give her what I can in the time I have left." When it was time to leave, Julia hugged Henry for a long time. "You'll come back, right, Uncle Henry, promise?" Henry felt his eyes well up. "I'll come back. Whenever I can, sweetie. And even when I can't be here in person, I'll be watching over you." 3 days later, Henry was sitting in his apartment when Paul arrived with a sealed envelope. The lawyer found his client visibly weaker, connected to a more powerful oxygen concentrator, and attended by a nurse. "The result is in," Paul said, handing the envelope to Henry. With trembling fingers, the businessman opened the document and read its contents. A serene smile formed on his pale face. 99.9% probability of paternity," he murmured. "I knew it. From the first moment I saw those eyes, something in me recognized it." "What do you plan to do now?" Paul asked, sitting across from his friend. "I want to tell Joseph the truth. He deserves to know. As for Julia—" Henry paused, pondering. "She's still too young to understand all the implications. Perhaps it's best to wait until she's older." Paul nodded. "The trust fund documents are ready for your signature. The house in Brooklyn Heights is also nearly finalized. We managed to expedite everything." "Good," Henry replied, suppressing a cough. "And what about the other request, the letters?" "Organized according to your instructions. Each one will be delivered on the specific date you determined." Henry looked out the window, contemplative. "I've scheduled a meeting with Joseph and Julia for tomorrow afternoon, here at the apartment. It will be our farewell." "Are you sure you're up to it?" Paul asked, worriedly observing his friend, whose breathing was becoming more labored each day. "I have no choice, Paul. Time is running out faster than we anticipated." The next morning, Joseph received a call at the supermarket where he worked. It was Dr. Mason, asking him to bring Julia to Henry's apartment after school. "His condition has worsened considerably. The doctors don't think he'll last more than a few days." Joseph felt a weight in his chest. In such a short time, the stranger from the park had become an important presence in their lives. "I'll bring Julia, of course. But should I tell her about his condition?" "Henry prefers to explain it himself. He has a way with words that might make it less frightening for her." At 4 in the afternoon, Joseph and Julia arrived at the luxurious building on the Upper East Side. The girl, impressed by the size of the building and the mirrored elevator, couldn't stop asking questions. "Does Uncle Henry live here, Grandpa? Is it like a castle?" Joseph smiled sadly. "Almost, Jules." When the apartment door opened, they were greeted by Dr. Mason, who led them to the balcony where Henry was waiting. The sight of the businessman shocked Joseph. In just 3 days, Henry seemed to have aged years. He was sitting in a reclining armchair, connected to tubes and monitors, with a nurse discreetly in the background. Julia, however, ran to him as she always did. "Uncle Henry, I brought you another drawing." The businessman smiled, extending a trembling hand to receive the colorful paper. "It's beautiful, Julia, the most beautiful one yet." The girl looked curiously at the equipment. Why are there so many machines? Are you more sick? Yes, sweetie. I am more sick, Henry answered gently. Actually, that's what I want to talk to you about today. Julia sat beside him while Joseph remained standing, tense. You know, Julia, there are some illnesses that doctors can't cure, even with all the knowledge they have, Henry began. I have one of those illnesses. The girl frowned. There's no medicine? No, dear. And that means that soon. I won't be able to be in the park to receive your drawings anymore. Julia seemed to process the information slowly. Are you going away? Where to? Henry looked at Joseph, seeking support. The grandfather approached, sitting next to his granddaughter. Uncle Henry needs to rest, Jules, forever. Like Mommy? The girl asked, with a surprising understanding for her age. Henry nodded, tears in his eyes. Like your mother. But before I go, I have something very important to say and to give to you both. He gestured to Paul, who brought a folder with documents and handed it to Joseph. First, Joseph, I want you to know that the test confirmed it. Julia is without a doubt my biological daughter. Julia looked confused from one adult to the other. What's biological? It's complicated, honey, Joseph replied, trying to hide his emotion. We can explain it better when you're older. What matters now, Henry continued, is that you and your grandfather will have a secure future. This folder contains the documents for the trust fund I've created for you, Julia. When you grow up, you will have the resources to study wherever you want, live comfortably, and follow your dreams. Julia obviously didn't understand the meaning of it, but she smiled when she saw the relief on her grandfather's face. Furthermore, Henry went on, there is a new house waiting for you in Brooklyn Heights. A beautiful house, with a garden, and your very own room with a big window, just like you wanted. The girl's eyes lit up. A real house, with my own room. Yes, and with space to play, study, grow. Henry was interrupted by a coughing fit. The nurse approached, but he waved her away. I'm fine, I just need a moment. Recovering, Henry continued. There's one more thing, Julia. I want you to promise me that you'll continue to be this kind and thoughtful girl, that you'll keep seeing those whom many ignore, just like you saw me on that park bench. I promise, the girl replied solemnly. Henry took a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. This necklace belonged to my mother, your grandmother. I want you to have it, to remember that even when we can't see each other, I'll always be watching over you. Julia accepted the gift with reverence, allowing Henry to place the necklace around her neck. Meanwhile, Paul was explaining the practical details of the documents to Joseph, how to access the trust fund for Julia's expenses, when they could move into the new house, how all the medical debts had been paid. The afternoon wore on with conversations, memories, and some moments of joy, despite the circumstances. Henry showed Julia photos of places he had visited around the world, promising that one day she would see them too. As the sun began to set, painting the New York harbor in orange and red, Henry seemed increasingly tired. I think it's time for us to say goodbye, Paul suggested gently. Julia, sensing the gravity of the moment, hugged Henry tightly. You're going to get better, Uncle Henry. I'll pray for you every day. Henry held back his tears, stroking the girl's hair. Thank you, sweetie. You've already made me better than I ever was. Turning to Joseph, he extended his hand, which the other man shook firmly. Take care of her, Joseph, and allow yourself to be happy too. You deserve it. I'll do my best to honor everything you've done for us, Joseph replied, his voice thick with emotion. As Julia and Joseph were leaving, the girl turned back one last time. See you tomorrow, Uncle Henry. Henry just smiled, knowing there would be no tomorrow. 3 days later, in his hospital bed, Henry Vancroft passed away peacefully. At his side were only Paul and the nurse. Following his instructions, there were no grand ceremonies, just a discreet burial with a few people present. Julia and Joseph attended, the girl holding tightly to the teddy bear Henry had given her. She placed a drawing on the casket before it was lowered, a colorful depiction of 3 people holding hands: herself, her, grandfather, and Henry. A week after the funeral, Paul visited Joseph and Julia at the small apartment in Astoria. He brought the keys to the new house and the final estate documents. "Everything is ready for the move," the lawyer informed them. "The house has been fully furnished according to Henry's instructions. There's even a room decorated especially for Julia, with everything a girl her age could want." Joseph, still processing all the changes, asked, "What about the letters he mentioned, the ones to be delivered in the future?" "They are safe in my office, each with a specific date, to be opened. The first is for when Julia turns 10. Then there's one for her 15th, another for her 18th, and the last for when she graduates from college." Joseph nodded. "It's hard to believe everything that's happened in such a short time. 2 months ago, it was just the two of us struggling to get by, and now you can live without financial worries," Paul completed. "Henry wanted that more than anything." The next day, Julia and Joseph moved into the new house. The girl ran from room to room, amazed by the space, the light, the garden. Her room, as promised, had a large window overlooking the lush greenery of Brooklyn Heights. On the bed, there was a simple note next to a new, even bigger teddy bear. "So you never forget to be brave. With love, Uncle Henry." The following months were a period of adjustment for the grandfather and granddaughter. Joseph, for the first time in years, was able to quit 2 of his 3 jobs, keeping only his work at the supermarket, more for routine than necessity. Julia was transferred to a nearby private school, where she quickly made new friends. Life seemed to be getting back on track. Every morning before school, Julia still asked to pass by Central Park. She would sit on the same bench where she had met Henry and talk quietly, as if he could hear her, telling him about her day, her new friends, her new house. Until, 6 months after Henry's passing, a cloud appeared on the horizon. Joseph received a legal notice. Edward Vance, Henry's former business partner, was contesting the validity of the will and the trust fund, claiming that the businessman was not of sound mind when he created them. "What do you mean he's contesting the will?" Joseph asked in disbelief, staring at the legal notice in his hands. Henry was perfectly lucid when he made his decisions. Dr. Paul Mason adjusted his glasses, visibly tense. They were gathered in the lawyer's Midtown Manhattan office, an elegant space overlooking the city. On the walls, diplomas and certificates attested to the professional's competence, but at that moment, not even his vast experience seemed to reassure him. "Edward Vance claims Henry was under the influence of strong medications that impaired his judgment," Paul explained. "He also suggests that a 6-year-old girl managed to emotionally manipulate a man weakened by illness." Joseph shook his head, outraged. "That's absurd. Julia barely understood what was happening. She just offered friendship to a lonely man." "I know that, Joseph, but Edward is a powerful and vindictive man. He expected to inherit a significant part of Henry's fortune. They were partners for over 30 years. When he learned that a multi-million-dollar fund was created for a child Henry had known for only a few months, he was furious." Joseph ran a hand through his grey hair, worried. "What can we do?" "We'll fight, obviously. I have all the signed documents, witnesses to Henry's mental state, statements from his doctors. The problem is that cases like this can drag on for years, and in the meantime, the fund is frozen." The news fell like a bombshell on the new life they were beginning to build. Although the house was already in Joseph's name and couldn't be contested, the frozen fund meant they would struggle to maintain their standard of living, Julia's private school, and other plans they were starting to make. How long could it take? Years, unfortunately. Edward has the money to hire the best lawyers and will use every possible delay tactic. Joseph looked out the window, thoughtful. Julia can't go through this. She's already suffered enough with the loss of her mother, and now Henry, whom she adored. I don't want her growing up in the middle of a legal battle. "I understand your concern," Paul replied. "For now we don't need to involve her, but we will need a solid strategy to face Edward." In the following weeks, Joseph's life became a race against time. While trying to maintain a normal routine for Julia, he spent hours in meetings with Paul and his legal team, recalling every detail of his encounters with Henry, providing information to strengthen their case. Julia, despite her young age, sensed that something was wrong. One night, as Joseph was tucking her into bed, she asked, "Grandpa, are we going to have to leave our new house?" Joseph's heart ached. "No, sweetie, this house is ours. Why do you ask?" "Because you've been worried, and I heard you on the phone talking about money with Mr. Paul." Joseph smiled sadly, stroking his granddaughter's hair. "You're very smart, you know that? No, we're not leaving. We're just sorting out some grown-up problems. Nothing you need to worry about." But the worry grew each day. Edward Vance began giving interviews to newspapers and TV shows, painting Henry as a man manipulated in his final days, and insinuating that Joseph and Julia had taken advantage of his fragility. The story of the millionaire who left his fortune to a girl he met in a park became a media sensation, with divided opinions on the legitimacy of the gesture. Paul tried to shield Joseph and Julia from the media exposure, but it was inevitable. Journalists started showing up at Julia's school, and Joseph had to temporarily pull her out of classes. One night, unable to sleep with so many worries, Joseph decided to organize the documents and belongings Henry had left behind. Among them was the folder with the letters to be delivered to Julia over the years. Paul had entrusted them to his care with instructions to only open them on the specified dates. Looking at the envelopes, each sealed and with a date handwritten by Henry, Joseph felt tempted. What if there was something in there that could help their case? A confession or piece of information that Henry hadn't had time to share while he was alive? Ethics battled with necessity. In the end, his concern for Julia's future won out. Careful not to damage the seal, Joseph opened the envelope, marked for Julia's 18th birthday. Inside was a handwritten letter and some documents. With a racing heart, Joseph began to read, "My dearest Julia, if you are reading this letter, it means you are turning 18 today. It is a time for celebration, for looking to the future, but also for learning truths that until now may have been kept secret. The greatest of these truths is, I am your biological father. Your mother Amanda and I loved each other deeply many years ago. It was a love complicated by external circumstances, but it was real. When she told me she was pregnant with you, I was happy, but also frightened. I was in the midst of a difficult divorce and I asked her for time. Amanda, proud as she always was, interpreted my request as rejection and disappeared from my life. Only many years later, already sick and with little time left, did fate gift me with your smile on that park bench. It was as if Amanda had orchestrated our meeting from beyond, giving me the chance to know the daughter I never knew I had. The DNA test we did confirmed what my heart already knew. You are my daughter, and it was the greatest joy of my final days to get to know you, to see your kindness, your intelligence, your compassion. If I kept this a secret until now, it was to protect you. You were too young to understand, and I didn't want to confuse you or make you feel divided. Your grandfather Joseph was and always will be your true father in the deepest sense of the word. He was there every day, caring, raising, loving. I was just the man who contributed your DNA and, in my final moments, the resources to secure your future. Along with this letter is the result of the DNA test and some photos of me with your mother, which prove our relationship at the time of your conception. There is also a legal document officially recognizing my paternity, should you ever wish to use my last name. Whatever your decision, know that I am deeply proud of who you are and who you will become. May your life be long and full, my daughter. With eternal love, your father, Henry Vancroft. Joseph let the letter fall onto the table, stunned. Although he already knew of Henry's paternity, confirmed by the DNA test, he hadn't expected such a clear and forceful declaration. Along with the letter were, as promised, the test results, photos of Henry with a clearly pregnant Amanda, and a notarized document of acknowledgement of paternity. It was definitive proof that Henry had acted with full awareness and legitimate motivation in creating the trust fund for Julia. It wasn't charity or manipulation. It was a father, providing for his daughter's future. Immediately, Joseph called Paul despite the late hour. "Paul, I found something that could change everything. The letter Henry left for Julia's 18th birthday." I opened it. "Joseph, you shouldn't have—" I know, but listen. The letter explicitly confesses that Julia is Henry's biological daughter, and it comes with irrefutable proof, photos, the DNA test, legal documents. It's exactly what we need to defeat Edward's claims." There was a silence on the other end of the line, followed by, "Bring everything to my office first thing in the morning. This really could be a game changer." The next morning, after leaving Julia with a trusted neighbor, Joseph went to Paul's office. The lawyer meticulously examined each document. "This is extraordinary," he concluded. "With this evidence, we can clearly demonstrate that Henry was acting rationally and with a legitimate motive, to secure the future of his own biological daughter. So we can use it in the case." Paul hesitated. "It's complicated. Technically, the letter shouldn't have been opened yet. But given the extraordinary circumstances and Julia's best interests, I believe we can argue it was a necessary discovery to protect her rights." In the following days, Paul and his team worked tirelessly to incorporate the new evidence into the case. An emergency motion was filed with the presiding judge, Judge Claudia Fisher, requesting a special hearing to present the new proof. Edward Vance, upon being notified of the hearing, intensified his media campaign. In one particularly cruel interview, he even suggested the DNA test could have been fraudulent and that Henry, in his weakened state, could have been induced to sign documents without understanding their content. "This man has no limits," Joseph commented, turning off the television after watching the interview. "How can he imply something so vile?" "It's desperation," Paul replied. "He knows we're close to winning. The money he expected to receive is slipping through his fingers." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. They would be tense days of preparation, with Joseph having to relive painful memories while trying to shield Julia from it all. One night, as they were having dinner, Julia asked innocently, "Grandpa, who was my dad?" The question caught Joseph by surprise. "Why are you asking now, Jules?" "Because at school we're talking about families and the teacher asked us to make a tree with pictures. I have pictures of you and Mommy, but not of my dad." Joseph looked at his granddaughter, carefully considering how to answer. It was too soon for the whole truth, but he didn't want to lie to her. "Your dad was someone very special, Julia, someone who loved your mother very much, but who, because of complicated life circumstances, couldn't be there when you were born." "He didn't want me?" the girl asked, her eyes welling up. "No, my love. It's nothing like that. Sometimes adults make mistakes, make decisions they later regret. But I can promise you that when he found out about you, he was very happy and wanted to take care of you in the best way he could." "Did you know him, Grandpa?" Joseph felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, I did, and he was a good man who cared about you very much." Julia seemed satisfied with the answer for now, but Joseph knew that one day he would have to tell her the whole truth, that the friend from the park bench, the Uncle Henry she adored, was in fact her biological father. That conversation, however, would have to wait. First, they needed to ensure that the legacy Henry had left for her was safe from the clutches of Edward Vance. The New York County Supreme Courthouse commanded respect with its imposing architecture. In the marble-floored corridors, Joseph walked nervously beside Paul, both in formal attire for the decisive hearing. "Remember," Paul instructed, "only answer what you're asked. Be direct and honest. We have the evidence on our side." Joseph nodded, clutching the folder that contained the original documents left by Henry. His mind was torn between the tension of the moment and his worry for Julia, who had been left in the care of Mrs. Celia, their trusted neighbor. Across the hall, Edward Vance was speaking in a low voice with his lawyers. Tall, elegant, with perfectly trimmed grey hair, the businessman exuded confidence and power. Upon spotting Joseph, he shot him a look of contempt. "Is that Edward?" Joseph asked in a low voice. "Yes. Ignore him. He's trying to intimidate you." The courtroom was packed. In addition to the parties directly involved and their legal representatives, there were journalists and curious onlookers drawn by the case that had gained notoriety in recent weeks. The story of the millionaire who left his fortune to a girl he met in a park had captured the public's imagination. Judge Claudia Fisher entered the room and everyone rose in respect. With over 20 years on the bench, she was known for her impartiality and technical rigor. We are here to review the new evidence presented in the case of the contestation of the will of Mr. Henry Vancroft, the judge announced. Due to the extraordinary nature of this evidence and its potential decisive impact, I have granted this special hearing prior to the full trial on the merits. Edward Vance and his lawyers immediately objected, citing irregular procedure, but the judge stood by her decision. "Dr. Mason, please present the new evidence," Judge Fisher requested. Paul stood up confidently. "Your Honor, we have here documents that unequivocally prove that Mr. Henry Vancroft acted with full lucidity and legitimate motivation when creating the trust fund for Julia Evans." The lawyer then explained about the discovered letter, the original DNA test, the photographs, and the document of acknowledgement of paternity. "As you can verify, Your Honor, Mr. Vancroft was not being manipulated or acting irrationally. He was simply fulfilling his paternal duty, securing the future of his biological daughter, the result of a relationship with Amanda Evans, Julia's mother, and the daughter of Mr. Joseph Evans." A murmur went through the room. Edward Vance visibly paled. "Objection, Your Honor," exclaimed Edward's lawyer. "These documents were supposed to remain sealed until the minor's 18th birthday. They were opened irregularly." "I understand the objection," the judge replied, "but given the extraordinary nature of the situation and considering the best interests of the minor, whose inheritance is being contested, I will accept the documents as evidence. The irregularity of the early opening is justified by the circumstances." For the next 2 hours, Joseph testified about his relationship with Henry, their meetings in the park, the visit to his small apartment, and the revelation of Julia's paternity. His testimony, emotional yet firm, impressed everyone in the room. "Mr. Evans," the judge asked, "when did you learn that Henry Vancroft was your granddaughter's biological father?" "A few days before his passing, Your Honor. He revealed it to me personally, later confirmed by the DNA test. But until that moment, I had no idea. I thought Julia's father was the man my daughter briefly married." "And the girl? Does she know?" "No, Your Honor. Julia is too young to understand. Henry and I agreed that this revelation should wait until she was old enough to process the information properly." The judge nodded understandingly. Next, she called Dr. Robert Campbell, the physician who had treated Henry in his final months. The specialist was categorical in stating that despite his physical frailty, the businessman remained fully lucid until his last days. "The medications we administered were primarily for pain management and respiratory support," the doctor explained. "At no point did they compromise his cognitive abilities or decision-making capacity." The final blow came when Paul presented a video that Henry had recorded days before his passing. In the recording, visibly weak but lucid, the businessman declared, "I am recording this video in full possession of my mental faculties to reaffirm my decision to create a trust fund for Julia Evans, my biological daughter. This decision is not the result of manipulation or mental confusion, but of a legitimate desire to assume my paternal responsibility and secure the future of the child whom, due to life's circumstances, I was only able to meet in my final days. I know that some will contest my decision, particularly Edward Vance, who always expected to inherit a significant portion of my assets. To prevent such challenges, I am leaving with my lawyer all the documents that prove my paternity and the legitimacy of my decisions." The room fell into absolute silence after the video ended. Edward Vance, defeated, whispered something to his lawyers. After a brief deliberation, the judge announced, "Based on the evidence presented, especially the DNA test confirming biological paternity, the medical statements regarding the deceased's mental condition, and the video testimony, I find that Henry Vancroft acted with full capacity and legitimate motives in creating the trust fund for Julia Evans," the judge continued. "Therefore, I deny the motion to contest the will filed by Edward Vance. The trust fund created for the benefit of Julia Evans, recognized biological daughter of Henry Vancroft, is declared valid and shall be immediately unfrozen. Court costs and attorney's fees are to be borne by the contestant." The room erupted in comments. Edward Vance rose furiously, leaving without a word to anyone. Joseph, for his part, let tears of relief escape. Paul hugged him, celebrating the victory. "It's over, Joseph. Julia's future is secure." Leaving the courthouse, Joseph was swarmed by journalists, eager for a statement, but Paul shielded him, quickly guiding him to a waiting car. "Now comes the hardest part," Joseph commented during the ride. "How do I explain all of this to Julia?" "It doesn't have to be all at once," Paul advised. "She's still little. Tell her what she can understand now and reveal more as she grows." That night, after tucking Julia into bed, Joseph sat beside her, his heart heavy with emotion. "Jules, remember when you asked me about your dad?" The girl nodded curiously. "I have something very important to tell you. Your dad, your biological dad, was Uncle Henry." Julia's eyes widened in surprise. "The man from the park bench?" "Yes, my love. He and your mummy met many years ago before you were born, but because of grown-up problems that are complicated to explain, they separated before he knew you were coming into the world. So he didn't know he was my dad when we met in the park." "No, he found out later, and he was so happy when he knew. That's why he wanted to help us, to give us this house, to make sure you could go to a good school." Julia was silent, processing the information in the way a 6-year-old could. "So Uncle Henry was my real dad? Like you're my real grandpa?" Joseph smiled tenderly. "He was your biological dad, yes. But being a real dad is more than that, Jules. It's being there, taking care of you, teaching you, loving you every day. Your biological dad loved you very much in the time he had, but he couldn't be with you from the beginning." "Did he go away because he didn't like me?" "No, my love, he went away because he was very sick, remember? If he could have, I'm sure he would have stayed with you forever. But even though he's not here physically, he made sure you would always be protected and loved." Julia hugged the teddy bear Henry had given her. "I miss him, Grandpa." "Me too, honey. Me too." The years passed. Julia grew into a brilliant and compassionate teenager. At 10, she received Henry's first letter, which spoke of courage and kindness. At 15, another letter arrived, this time with advice on studies and dreams for the future. Following the wish expressed by Henry in his letters, Julia developed a special sensitivity for lonely and overlooked people in society. In high school, she created a project to visit nursing homes, inspired by the experience that had changed her life. At 18, already aware of the full story of her origins, Julia decided to study social work. "I want to help people like my biological father, who are sick and alone, and people like you, Grandpa, who carry the world on their shoulders to care for those they love," she explained to Joseph. With the support of the trust fund created by Henry, Julia not only graduated with honors, but also established a foundation dedicated to connecting young volunteers with lonely elderly people in hospitals and long-term care facilities. The Park Bench Project, as she named it, became a national benchmark for volunteerism and care, inspiring similar initiatives across the country. At 23, during her graduation speech, Julia shared her story. "It all started with a simple question from a 6-year-old girl to a lonely man on a park bench. Why do you have that thing in your nose?" That innocent question triggered a series of events that transformed not only my life but the lives of thousands of people through the Park Bench Project. I learned that sometimes the greatest acts of love come disguised as small gestures: a shared cookie, a gifted drawing, a casual conversation. That's how my biological father, a man I only knew in his final days, taught me to see the invisible. Julia's words moved everyone present, especially Joseph, now a man with completely white hair who watched his granddaughter's graduation with pride. 5 years later, married and pregnant with her first child, Julia received Henry's last letter, the one reserved for when she graduated. In it, the father she barely knew expressed his anticipated pride in the woman he knew she would become. "My daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means you have fulfilled the dream of completing your college education. I don't know what career you've chosen, but I am certain that with your natural compassion and intelligence, you are making a difference in the world. I want you to know that the greatest legacy we can leave is not money or property, but the impact we have on the lives of others. You, at just 6 years old, transformed my final days. You gave me purpose when I had given up, brought light when I saw only darkness. The fund I created for you was never about money. It was about opportunity, the opportunity to study without worry, to pursue your dreams, to become who you truly are. I hope that, over the years, you have come to understand that family is not defined by blood alone. Your grandfather Joseph, who is likely by your side today, is your true father in every sense that matters. He was there every day, faced every hardship, put his life on hold to prioritize yours. I was just a moment in your story, but you were the most important chapter of mine. Continue to see the invisible, my daughter. Continue to spread kindness in a world that so desperately needs it. And always remember the words my mother used to tell me. True greatness lies in planting trees under whose shade we will never sit. You are the most beautiful tree I ever planted. With eternal love, your father, Henry Vancroft. Moved, Julia folded the letter and stored it with the others in a special box. She caressed her belly, feeling the baby's movements. If it's a boy, she said to her husband, I'll name him Henry, in honor of my father. A few months later, on a sunny morning, Julia took her newborn son to Central Park. She sat on the same bench where it all began, now marked with a small commemorative plaque for the Park Bench Project. While nursing little Henry, she noticed an elderly man sitting alone a few benches away. The man was using a portable oxygen device and staring melancholically at the horizon. A volunteer from the Park Bench Project, a young girl of about 16, approached the man and started a conversation. From where she sat, Julia could see the elderly man's face gradually light up, as if a ray of sunshine had hit him from within. "See that, my son?" Julia whispered to the baby. "That's how we change the world, one park bench at a time." At that moment, Julia felt a gentle breeze caress her face, as if her mother and her biological father were there, smiling in approval. The cycle of compassion started so many years ago continued, expanding in ever-widening circles, touching countless lives. The legacy of love from Henry Vancroft lived on not only through Julia and her son, but through every young person who learned to see the invisible, every elderly person who rediscovered the joy of being seen, and every heart that opened to the possibility that a simple encounter on a park bench could indeed change entire destinies. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Julia and Henry has touched your hearts and shown how small gestures of kindness can transform entire lives. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other touching American stories. Find it by clicking here on the side. If you were moved by this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with anyone who also needs to reconnect with the essence of what truly matters in life: love, compassion, and the courage to see those whom many ignore. We'll see you in the comments and in our next story.